Good evening. It is time for today's Tax Talk. I'm your host. I'm attorney Stephen Leahy. And, we had sometime in December, I did a story about Charlie Sheen going to tax court. And it was from a story on Forbes. And I was pointing out how hard a offer and compromise was, because that's what it was. That's what they were talking about, an offer and compromise. Well, I got an email from his representative. So he's not using an attorney. He's got a CPA in tax court. CPAs can represent people in tax court. They can get admitted to represent people in tax court. Not a very easy thing for CPAs to do either, to be quite honest with you. So, but he's got an attorney. I mean, his CPA is his name is Stephen Jager, I believe. Jager. And he sent me an email about what's going on. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Before I go aside, let's talk about today is Wednesday, January 26th, the year of our Lord, 2022. I think I got the date wrong yesterday, because I think I said yesterday it was the 26th. Today is the 26th. And so we're going to talk about Charlie Sheen's case in tax court. Won't you join us? Well, I'm going to cut this down here. Okay, so anyway, I cut it down. Here's what's going on. Our friend YouTube has been flagging my videos because they're telling me my song is unlicensed and I'm a copyright violator. But I have a license for it. I'm an attorney. I don't go around using copyrighted material without permission. That wouldn't be very attorney-like. And so I do that. So let's go to the story. I was kind of hesitant to, but the gentleman's put it out there. Didn't tell me not to share it. And so I'm going to talk about his letter to me. Let's see if I can make it bigger so we can read it together. And so let's do that. Okay. It says, hi, Mr. Leahy. That's me. I am a CPA who is representing Mr. Sheen before the United States Tax Court. I just watched your broadcast dated December 9th on Vimeo. I am not a lawyer, but I am admitted to practice in the tax court. With all due respect to you, you should not rely on stories you have read to base your broadcast. Well, I can't be in court with you. I have to rely on others who have been there, as I'm going to rely on some things that you tell me, even though that's only one side of the story. I believe that you lawyers refer to this as hearsay. Actually, hearsay is an out-of-court statement used as evidence in court for the truth of the matter asserted, and that's really not what I'm doing. But I get what he's saying. I was disappointed when I repeat what you tell me. This is also in that category as hearsay by your own definition. I was disappointed when I read Rob Wood's piece in Forbes, which forms your basis for your broadcast. I read the piece. Mr. Wood should have spoken with me first before he wrote the piece. Probably a good thing to do. Contrary to what you stated in your broadcast, my client has not yet lost in tax court. Actually, he lost, but it's been remanded. Okay, and that's it's a technicality. I get what he's saying. It's not over yet. In fact, the court has just ordered a remand of the case. You can't, they remand it. Actually, they're remanding it back to the appeals court. See the story as reported in tax notes, which I might point out was careful by reaching out to me in advance of publishing their story so that they could get the facts correct. During your broadcast, you also made an assumption that I am the same guy who previously made the request for an installment agreement. That is not true. I might have assumed that, and I didn't see that in my. Well, I did rewatch the piece to see if there was some wild exaggerations or falsehoods in the first story, and I didn't see any. Actually, it wasn't complete, but everything I believe was factual. It's a matter of perspective. I came into the case after the first case 2015 was docketed. The OIC that I submitted was done in good faith, and our dispute really focuses on a reasonable collection potential, which, as I am sure you have experienced in your own practice, can be very nuanced. Through, though, a very spirited discussion, and with each of us making concessions, the settlement officer and I agreed upon a much more likely reasonable collection potential. And I also suggested that I would be willing to have a future income collateral agreement to give the IRS an upside. The IRS failed to address the sweetener in their notice of determination, which was yet another abuse of discretion. Now, abuse of discretion is a legal term that they use in order to, and that's a legal conclusion that has not yet been reached, I don't believe. The agreement that the settlement officer and I reached was approved by his group manager, approved by IRS counsel for its legal sufficiency, and went all the way to the chain of command until it got to the area director of appeals, who ultimately put a kibosh on it without giving his reasoning or an explanation. That, Mr. Leahy, is an abuse of discretion. And again, another legal conclusion. Might be true, may not be true. I don't know. If you read the underlying petition, which I authored and filed, I have not yet read it. I will read it. You will get the true facts, and a petition is a version of the facts. The court does not need to even opine on whether my assertions are of error are true, because at IRS counsel's request, we together filed a joint motion for remand of the case back to appeals, which will take place at the IRS appeals office outside of Los Angeles. There was a link to the underlying petition in the PDF article attached. I realize that this does not mean that I will ultimately be successful in obtaining the offer from Mr. Sheen, but it does mean that if the IRS does say no, they will have to provide a reasoned explanation for their decision, or it will, again, constitute an abuse of discretion. And as of the 2015 case, which you were so harshly critical about, the government's motion for summary judgment has most recently been answered by me, and I have been able to point out the existence of some very genuine issues of material fact, which I believe will not make a slam dunk for the IRS counsel to prevail, at least not based on summary judgment. Thank you for the opportunity to offer you some of the straight scoop and not the hearsay which you jumped to conclusions. So I'm going to disagree with him that I jumped to conclusions, because I don't think I did. But I get where he's coming from, and I wanted to give him a fair reading. That's why I wanted to read it, and not just summarize it. So here's the article that he pointed out. Let me get rid of it. This is actually, I've been to this tax notes website before. They have a lot of good, as a tax attorney, I find there's lots of good stuff here. So let's just read it. Actor Charlie Sheen succeeded in having his tax court collection due process case remanded to IRS appeals so that he can again pitch his $3.1 million offer and compromise to settle tax debts for 3 tax years. This case is remanded to Respondent's Office of Appeals for the purpose of affording petitioner an administrative hearing pursuant to, the court wrote on an order. Sheen versus Commissioner. Sheen filed a tax court petition in November 2021 to protest an IRS appeals notice of determination rejecting his $3.1 million offer and compromise, which would cover his tax liabilities for 15, 16, 17, and 18. According to the petition, the parties had engaged in extensive negotiations over collection alternatives, which an appeals settlement officer and others in the chain of command ultimately agreeing that the OIC was legally sufficient. But the Los Angeles area director for IRS appeals overruled that decision and rejected the OIC on the grounds that Sheen could fully pay his tax liability. This is very common, that they always find the way they value things and the way you value things may be different. And I'll talk about this in just a moment. The petition argued that the area director abused his discretion by rejecting the offer and compromise without providing any reasoning or offering an opportunity for Sheen to address his concerns. It asked the tax court to remand the matter to the IRS appeals office outside the jurisdiction of Los Angeles area director. After the IRS filed an answer in late December 2021, the parties filed a joint motion January 18th to have the case remanded to IRS appeals. The court's January 24th order granted that motion and instructed the IRS to offer an appeals administrative hearing to Sheen by April 1st. I'm delighted the IRS counsel reached out and offered this motion to remand. Sheen's representative said, Stephen Jager. I think it's either Jager or Jager, Jager of Feynman West and the company, told Tax Notes, we were able to get what I asked for in the petition, reconsideration of the offer in compromise. The hearing will be held at the appeals office outside of Los Angeles, Jager said. The case is Sheen versus Commissioner, and then they give the docket number. Okay, so good stuff, and I find all this stuff very interesting as a tax attorney who has cases in tax court also, and so I find it interesting. But let me just talk about an offer in compromise for just a moment. Okay, last year that we have records for, 2020, I believe, because we haven't done the 2021 tax year yet, so we don't know. But in 2020, the IRS closed I could get the actual numbers, but it's rounded 7.4 million collection cases. And a collection case is when somebody owes money to the IRS and how it gets resolved. You can do an offer in compromise. They can go currently not collectible. It could be closed because of the statute of limitations, whatever, or an offer in compromise. So 7.4 million cases were settled. Of those 7.4 million cases, 14,000 roughly, a little bit more than 14,000, were settled with an offer in compromise. So that's less than 0.25% of all cases, collection cases, are settled with an offer in compromise. And the reason why that is that the IRS just doesn't, they hold it out there. And I have gotten offers for people, but generally it's people who have nothing, they don't have any assets, and they're on a fixed income. Because as your income fluctuates, and I'm sure Mr. Sheen's income fluctuates, also he has promise of making a lot of money in the future. I don't know, he's made a lot of money in the past. So the IRS would say, well, then he's got a likelihood that he can make a lot of money in the future. And that's why they wouldn't like to settle for less than what you owe. And so an offer in compromise is, and he talks about, these negotiations going on. But actually an offer is not that much of a negotiation. I mean, it is in the sense that you're trying to value things, right? So an offer is, they look at your monthly income, they subtract from that all your reasonable and necessary expenses, and they come up with what they call disposable income. Again, you can go back and forth about what is a reasonable expense and change that number, what comes out to be a disposable income. And that's where the negotiation comes about what is and what is not a reasonable expense. And then you add to that all your equity in any property that you have. And again, that's also up for negotiations in the sense that, what is this worth? What is my home in California worth? What's my vacation home worth? What's my car worth? All these things, and then so there is some negotiations into finding the value of these, and then the value of his prospects. You have to prove that there is what they call doubt to collectability, and that the IRS is probably not going to get paid everything that they're owed, and so then they ask for, then they'll settle for less because they're not going to get paid anyway. So that's what an offer is. It gets complicated. I have to say that there's an ongoing case. They said for 2015. Not sure what the issues are there. I should probably go read that one too. In 2008, that's a very quick turnaround that they would file a case in November 2021 and it would be settled already. That's very unlikely. It doesn't happen very often. That's very quick for it. And one of the things, when you go to tax court, one of the first things that they do is they send it back to appeals. And the appeals officer, if there's any issues, that's who and before it goes to the lawyers. And then the lawyers they will argue the legal, will make the legal arguments in court. But many of the arguments aren't legal, they're accounting, as I just mentioned. So the arguments are, what's this worth? what is my disposable income? Getting those numbers out, that's more of an accounting than argument than a legal argument. He has a legal argument, which is the discretion and all that. That would go to the court. The appeals officer won't make those determinations whether it was beyond, whether it was a abuse of discretion. Generally, and so the general, the appeals officer would make a determination based on the offer. Good luck to Mr. Jager and Mr. Sheen, and I hope they get their offer. It's an uphill battle, as my response to Mr. Jager or Jager. I did tell them I thought that it's an uphill battle. I did mention those statistics I just mentioned to you, and I offered my good graces, and then I told them that I was going to update the story, so everybody's up to date. I'm not trying to all I did was report what the story was, and I'm not there myself, and so I'm only reporting what others reported. But that's what I do every night. That's what most, right? If you watch the news, they're not part of the news. They simply read the news. That's all I'm doing. I'm reading the news. So anyway, but I like the tax news anyway. So that's what that's where I wanted to go with this today. Remember, the offer is a very difficult matter. He mentioned in his letter that when he takes these offers and compromise, he tells his clients this. But generally, if a client comes to me and says, Attorney Leahy, I want an offer and compromise, I generally don't take those cases up front because they're so rare, and the chances and then I'm not going to be able to meet those expectations, and then I'm going to have an unhappy client. Don't like unhappy clients. And if it's built into it right from the beginning, well, then you're better off not taking that case than having a client that is going to be unhappy, right? Because some people don't want to hear the truth, and I'm always one to tell the truth, and sometimes people don't want to hear it. So I get people to come in and talk to me about their case, and they want reassurances. Well, I'm here because I want you to tell me everything's going to be fine. Well, I can't give those reassurances. I don't know enough about the case, and I haven't done anything, so I can't give you reassurances. And so again, I would rather underpromise and overperform than to overpromise and then not perform. That doesn't help me. It doesn't help my client, and it doesn't help the IRS either. So anyway, that's what I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. I wanted to bring this to your attention, that there is a change in the case. It's ongoing. It's been remanded for appeals. If I find more out about it, I'll be happy to tell you. I'm going to read I will read the petition, and if there's something in there that I think you should know, I'll let you know. So anyway, thanks so much for listening. I remember that I'm going to ask you to like and share. Where else do you get this kind of information? Yeah, as I mentioned, most every political story is really about taxes. How do they get the money and how do they spend it? And that's all IRS stuff. So it begins and ends with tax talk, law, right? Actually, stories. So that's what we try to bring to you. So like and share, please. It really would help us, and we want to get the word out. So thanks very much. And as I always close out on the show, I tell people, let me go back. I got the wrong one. What I always tell people is, what happens if you're fighting the IRS? What happens if you owe the IRS money? What if you want to settle the case? What if and you don't know where to begin? Here's where you begin. You get a copy of my book, Deal with Your IRS Problem Today. Go to freeirsbook.com and get a copy of my book, freeirsbook.com. Get a copy of Deal with Your IRS Problem Today. So thanks so much for joining us. Tomorrow is Thursday. We'll be back with more tax talk, and I hope you join us then. Thank you so much. Let me make sure I can get this together. So, okay. I got to see what happens when I stop it. I have to rewind it. I usually let it play out, but I didn't. Okay, so thanks so much, and we'll see you again tomorrow for today's Tax Talk.